panel and also the people who are watching. Welcome to the GCC Talent Agenda webinar. It's the first one for the year. So really excited to kick off on International Women's Day about women at work. Before I kind of dive in, just to introduce myself, my name is Bianca and I am the co-founder of Pulse, and I've moderated a couple of these kind of Talent Agenda webinars last year and I really love them. So I'm really happy to be back with this amazing panel here today. So, I'm going to ask the ladies to introduce themselves. But really today on International Women's Day, the point is to kind of bring women together to talk around the world of work, how it's changed for women, what are some of the barriers we still have, and what is kind of some of the advice and guidance to, I think, both men and women out there, and how we can have more visibility around women in the workplace. This topic is very, very dear to my heart because we actually run an all-woman business. It was by mistake. I'm kind of not by design, but very happy that we do. So I'm really excited to get to talk to these wonderful ladies today. So just for the audience, you're more than welcome to kind of ask questions in the chat as we go along. You don't have to wait till the end, even though there will be a Q&A at the end for you guys to kind of ask any questions to the ladies that you have. But if it comes up while we're talking, please pop in questions. We also love to hear your experience shares around anything that you might kind of have experienced. It's always nice for us to read and see that. So I'm going to hand over to the ladies to introduce themselves, and we'll start with you, Bumi, and then we'll go to Miss and then Jessica, because that's kind of the order on my screen. So over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bianca. And hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be joining this awesome ladies today to talk about also something that's quite passionate, a big passion for me around, gender diversity and equity and inclusion and all that great stuff. So my name is Bumi Pratt. I am based out of Dubai today, really nice and sunny day. I work with the Maersk, the AP Moller Group. Maersk, for some of you will know us as Maersk with the container ships. And I've been sort of with the company a couple years now, and today really looking after sort of talent and development and how we deploy that across the Asia Pacific region. I'm Nigerian by birth, very proud Nigerian, but have lived outside of Nigeria for a couple years now. So happy to be on the panel today.
Thanks, Bumi. That's great to kind of hear a little bit more about you. How about you, Miss Anne?
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here as well. So I'm currently in Nigeria. So there was something I actually noticed, Bianca, and so I noticed that you studied occupational psychology, which is something that I did as well for my master's, which I'm very excited about because I rarely hear people study occupational psychology. So I mean, I'm really passionate about people. That's one of the reasons why I studied that. And I've always kind of been interested in areas where people and tech connect. So throughout my career, I've kind of taken up roles that that intersect with people as well as tech. So right now I'm really focused on the tech space, and I'm currently working at a company called Sparkle. So we're a digital bank, and we're trying to build a bank that allows people to basically make transactions wherever they are in the world. So yeah, that's me. I lead the people team there. And I lead the over 40 Sparklers at the moment. And basically, I handle everything that has to do with HR. So from employee experience to leading our L&D initiatives, performance management, and the whole works. So I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to drive this conversation around getting female talent in the workplace, which is a very strong passion.
Thanks, Miss Anne, and always so nice to meet another occupational psychologist. There's not many of us out there, so it's always nice to meet a fellow IOP. Jessica, how about you?
Thanks, Bianca. Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. I'm always up for anything diversity, especially when it comes to gender equality and equity in the corporate space. So I always find myself in the middle of things like that because I'm very, very passionate about it. So I'm Jessica. I work for a company called Agreco, based off of, I'm based in Nigeria. I'm Nigerian. I'm based in Lagos, Nigeria. So I head the people team for West and Central Africa. So we're currently active in about 9 countries in West and Central Africa. So it's kind of like a big team. So Agreco is a power generation company. So we rent power to our customers, and when utility, oil and gas, and all of that good engineering industry. So I'm very happy to be here today. I've been working with Agreco for 4 years now, and it's a very, very interesting experience. So I'm very, very happy to share that in this space. So looking forward to sharing knowledge.
Incredible. Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah.
So before we dive in with the questions, just a little bit about what Pulse Motivation does. So we help kind of businesses understand how to motivate and retain their talent. It's a tech platform. And we are very active in South Africa and in the UK. And yeah, we're just very lucky to work with an amazing team of women kind of around the world and doing exciting stuff in the employee experience space. So, I mean, each of you in kind of your intro chatted around a little bit kind of the kind of businesses that you're in and the work that you do. And they're all pretty traditionally male-dominated industries and spaces, but you're all women who've climbed the ranks. You're obviously incredibly successful there. So can you each just tell us a little bit about like kind of your experience in growing within a career as women in a traditionally male-dominated environment? Maybe we can start with you, Jessica. I'm going to go backwards this time.
Okay, great. Wow, it's been a very interesting experience for me. Straight out of school, I started my career in HR because I have a degree in HR and a master's degree in HR in human resource management. So it's been human resource business partnering generalist all my career. And I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, I have only worked in engineering industries, I would say manufacturing, oil and gas, and now power. So it's been all male dominated, and it's been very, very interesting for me in particular because I'm inherently very shy. I'm inherently an introvert, but you can't be that in that space. So I had to learn. I had to self-learn really, really quickly because I started really, really young. I had to start learn really, really quickly to be a bit, I would say, assertive, more firm, extremely professional. Find the balance between being not being seen as overly friendly or not being seen and overly unapproachable. It's a struggle. I don't know if you ladies feel what I feel is a struggle, being in the boardroom, being in all these meetings or trying to roll out policies on trying to get this male dominated space to understand the beauty of diversity or the beauty of whatever strange policies that is going on, because they do tend to want to listen men do tend to want to listen to men, unfortunately. So most times there's this extra work and you have to extra motivate yourself, because coming up I didn't really have a lot of female mentors within that space to look up to. Unfortunately, it's changed now, but earlier on in my career, I had to self motivate myself, and I'm trying to change that now by trying to guide young ones I'm seeing coming up, and not being their mentor per se, but just hold their hands, and we are growing and changing and creating space for ourselves together. So that's what I would say based on my personal experience, how my journey has been. But it's still a journey. It's still a journey. Even where I am now, I still find that we have a lot more to learn than than you would think, because social media or globalization, you think that we've really, really grown. But in reality, there's still so much when it comes to the gender equity or gender equality in the corporate space, especially in Africa, because of the way our culture is engraved in us. The
Yeah.
culture of, women are supposed to be home, and you don't want to know how many times I've been asked, what does your husband or kids think about you traveling all the time. You're always traveling every time in the airport. Even people that don't work with me, they always, that's the first thing. How is your husband feeling about this this travel? You're always traveling. So yeah,
It's
it's very, very, very
it's always, yeah.
interesting.
It's always crazy to me, two things. One, the
Yeah.
things that people can ask strangers, like that they think that that's an appropriate question, always blows my mind. What does your wife think about you traveling? And two, yeah, that like tradition is really kind of deep rooted, and it becomes kind of a way of an unconscious way of thinking that you actually have to start to like cycle back in order to change that thinking. So yeah, thanks, Jessica. That was so interesting. How about you, Misan?
I mean, I can completely relate with Jessica, mostly because for me, I think I've kind of risen, through the ranks very quickly. So prior to where I am currently, I was leading the West African HR, basically the HR team across like 7 West African markets. And in that role, I was not only the youngest woman in the leadership team, but I was only like not the youngest person in the leadership team, but I was also the only woman in the leadership team. So there was a lot of pressure that came with that. So going into that role, I know that I had a lot of advice from different people. People would tell me, you need to dress a certain way so people can take you seriously. You need to speak a certain way. You can't be too friendly with employees so that they respect you. You can't say this, you can't say that. You have to be assertive. You have to almost have like a Margaret Thatcher kind of presence within the office so people could respect you. But I think for me, like I've always been sort of like a rebel. I've never really been one to follow like traditional norms or things like that. So even in terms of the way I dress, like I dressed the way I wanted to dress. And for me, I just felt that no matter where I am, like I feel like my work would speak for itself, right? Like as long as I am in the room, making sure that I'm confident about the things I'm saying, I've done the research, I would speak up about the things that I want to say, right? But I find that, based on what Jessica has said as well, like it's also difficult because there are times where maybe you're speaking and then people shut you up. You're interrupted a lot of times in the boardroom. Your opinions are not shared because people tend to think that, oh, what's she even saying? Like she's young, like she doesn't understand things. But I think for me, I've always had to fight. Like not fight in an aggressive way, but always make sure that my voice is heard. And I think just having that privilege of growing very quickly in my career, I have kind of learned to do that very quickly. So like Jessica said, I didn't really have a lot of mentors in this space. So I had to learn a lot of these things on the job. I made loads of mistakes as well. There'll be times where I'll be emotional at the office, where sometimes I want to scream. I want to just like say the things I want to say, but I've learned over time, and I think like experience is the best teacher, to be very honest. So I've learned over time to just kind of understand, striking the balance between being firm and also, also having that human feel as well, which I think is really important, and also bringing your full self to work. Because I do think that there is like, a thing such as cognitive dissonance. Bianca, you probably relate with that, which is that when you're a different person at work, when you have to like put on a different cap or different like mask when you have to go into work, doing that is just a lot of pressure. And I don't think it's something that's sustainable. And over time, what you would find is that you tend to resent your career, you tend to resent your job. So for me, I've always wanted to just be myself. I've always wanted to present the person I am at home, at work, and just have or be in an environment where people would actually embrace me for who I am, right? So, and I'm very fortunate in the organization that I'm in because I'm working with a fantastic boss that is truly accommodating. He embraces people for who they are, and it's kind of like embedded in our culture, and we ask people to bring themselves to work. We actually say that during our interview processes, and we tell people, look, we're not asking you to be anything else than who you are. We're interviewing you because we feel that you have the capabilities to do the job. So just come in, be who you are, kill it at your job, and that's pretty much all that's required. So I think being in the right organization actually helps you to overcome some of these challenges. The wrong organization can only make you like nervous and doubt yourself, doubt your skill sets and all of that. But one thing I will say is that as long as you know your stuff, you come this far, you can do it. Basically, you just need to, you just need to keep pushing, and one day your voice is going to be heard. But I'll say, like, don't stop trying, don't stop, trying to be assertive and confident in those spaces. They put you in those rooms for a reason, so make your voice heard at the table. Yeah,
I agree. And hopefully more organizations, especially kind of new businesses emerging or SMEs, can start to kind of bring in that culture of be yourself and bring yourself to work. We hired you for you, not to be a cookie cutter of someone else. Bumi, what about you and your story?
I mean, Bianca, I really hope that we actually, in a few years, don't start such panel discussions with the same type of experiences as females in sort of some industries, because clearly what Jessica and Misan are speaking about completely resonates with me, right? And I think that's the sad part, right? And I really hope that we can turn some of these things around so that we can create more sort of role models that the younger generation can look forward to, but also change some of these experiences. We actually do not necessarily need to be going through some of these experiences to learn, right? So again, mine is pretty similar. One of the first roles, so I worked at a certain time, I worked with Tetra Pak manufacturing in Nigeria, and I was sort of first female, youngest in the room, on the leadership team, and it was a thing, right? And then I moved into sort of APM terminals. Again, the first time they'd had a female head of HR, local, probably youngest in the room, and sort of it became a thing that you walk into a room. Now I say to people, it doesn't really matter who else is in the room, because I probably won't find a female or a black or young in the room. So I stopped looking. But again, I've worked in these industries where it is traditionally male, and some of the things have really been to question, is it really a male job? I mean, is there a gender tied to this role? Or is that just sort of something that has been handed down through culture or the way that we do it, code? So I found myself in my career sort of walking through some of these things and really challenging, some of the norms that I've had, but also that the organizations have had. And Miss, you were speaking to some of these to say sort of speak up and be brave and sort of bring your whole self to work, right? But that's something that I really struggled with on the how do you again make the balance between trying to be sort of you, but also adapting yourself to what is the currency or the language in the organization that you've been in. So yeah, I've been in Tetra Pak, I've been in Maersk, I've been in APM terminals, all sort of traditionally male, but we're seeing that is changing, right? Because the jobs and the brains in the room are really not defined by gender, right? So I think that's kind of where I'm really happy to see the progress that we're making. But as I was saying earlier, really hoping that we can actually change some of this, because that's how we get more people into our industries, but also that we're not leaving anyone out, right? Which is super critical in how we build the workforce going forward.
Thanks, Bumi. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think at the end of our discussion today, I'm going to ask each of you for advice for not only women but men, because I think sometimes what we do is we put the onus on women to like claw up and get their seat at the table, but actually we should all be accountable for creating a space, be that as kind of men or anyone who has like is non-binary, like there needs to be a space where men are also responsible for trying to help grow women in the workplace, which I'm excited to get to. But before we get there, speaking to what you each said, there is still obviously kind of gender inequality, specifically within corporate Africa, which links to what you were saying, Jessica, around kind of traditional female and male roles. Why do you ladies think it still is a problem, even though kind of we've had these conversations year on year, we talk about these things, there is movement is sometimes slower than we would like. Why do you ladies think that this kind of problem still persists in corporate Africa?
Well, I would say, I think The first thing I would say is our culture, and I know that's always at the forefront, but that's because I think it's in our core. It's inherently embedded in us. It's steeped in African culture. Across, I work with a lot of Africans, so I know it's very similar. Our backgrounds are very similar when it comes to gender roles. What women are supposed to be doing, what men are supposed to be doing. Because I will tell you, even yesterday, I had a former colleague who was in an oil and gas space trying to reach me, but I was traveling around Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, and then I got back, and he sent me a text to say, a woman, traveling all these countries, I pray to God for resilience and protection in your life. And I thought about it. Should it be like a learning moment for me to educate this man? But he's an older man. He's very steeped in his belief. His way is like more than times to my age. And I just said amen. And I closed that, because sometimes you have to recognize who can change or who can really, really adapt, and see that a woman can do whatever. There's no gender roles. So our culture is still very, very much at the forefront of why we haven't, we are still very slow in moving in moving forward. And also, I feel like a lot of African countries don't have very specific, diverse anti-discrimination, gender equality laws and policies in place. And even the ones that do, they are not enforceable. They are really, really not enforceable. It's all up in the air. I know a few countries have, really done, like South Africa, for example. I know they've really done a great job in trying to enforce those laws, but it's very little. It's very, very little. And in most countries, the only anti-discrimination laws I see in most countries is relating to maternity leave, when a woman is pregnant. And it's still, again, changed to, a woman is supposed to be pregnant, let her go home, take care of a kid, and not really in the corporate space when she's at work. Where's the protection and everything? And I'm always at the forefront of very sensitive, policies around sexual harassment. And the things in African culture that they see as sexual harassment, for example, when you are investigating and you communicate to a colleague that something is indeed harassment, you can see the genuine shock on their face, on your male colleague's face. So, everything is around culture and how we're brought up. It's changing, but it's really, really changing. Way slower than I would like, to be honest. So I feel like culture is at the forefront. Policies and laws, anti-discrimination laws, equality laws, gender specific.
Oh, we've lost Jessica. I don't know if it's just on my side or for you ladies as well. That Jessica, you're back. Sorry, we lost you. But
Hi. Sorry, so I was just saying laws and anti-discrimination laws, policies. I think when we make this very visible, that is important to us as a society and as a continent, I think it would go a long way. Yeah, I think it would go a long way.
Are the younger generation who's coming into the workforce, do they think differently, or do a lot of them still carry the tradition from their families? Or is it like some are different, some?
I think, Bianca, if I can just jump in, and Jessica, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that at least for our industry, we are seeing that doesn't really hold true. Right. So if I give you an example, when we were doing some work around terminals, and of course traditionally it's the men who are crane operators, and there was this sort of stereotype saying, it's a man's job. And then we started asking, is it really, what is it that stops a female from climbing up the cranes? Oh, there are too many steps, because if you know what the there's this huge equipment, and we're like, but if a person is fit and they can actually go up, so the criteria is not about gender, it's about fitness, right? So if you are fit and you can go up the cranes, you can operate, they drive cars, they can operate just the way it is. But I think if I add one more layer, is that we also need to enable structures, right, to help the policies, but also to sort of almost demystify the culture that we bring into the room, right? So, for example, one of the things that we had done was to say we want to have more females in the terminal space, but we didn't have overalls that were female size. So when you got an intern who was female, you gave her a male's overall, which just doesn't make any. So you also have to sort of enable the structures to say, okay, if I'm going to get more females in, I need a female washroom, for example. It cannot be only one thing. So it's good to have a policy, but when you do hire females and you bring them in, how do we make sure that we have enabling structures that allow them to sort of operate as any other person would be? So I think, Bianca, it's changing, but I think we also need to help enable these structures so that really to be implemented, or work against the culture and really demystify.
Bumi, we're struggling with your signal. Sorry, so we missed that last part. Miss San, what about in the fintech space? Because I think you have a different kind of generation, I'm assuming, of employee coming in. What are you finding within the kind of fintech space?
So I think what's happening in tech is that tech is, I would say, generally more diverse, but not necessarily when it has to do with core engineering or has to do with coding specifically. But I think it's a much deeper nuanced problem, like Jessica had said. So it really starts way back from how boys and girls are raised in different households. So I would even use maybe a rural community for example. And it kind of, I would say it kind of is sometimes driven by poverty as well, because you find households where you have both boys and girls, but what you're finding is that the boys are more educated than the girls, even if the girls are the ones that are more interested in school. That's because obviously the parents can't afford to take everyone to school, so they just choose the boys because they feel like the boys are the primary or will eventually become the primary providers for their future families, right? There's also even an idea around courses like engineering. So I think when women are raised, even in our different households, and it's very subtle. It's not exactly outright where it's people would say, oh, women are lesser than men. It's in the little things such as, okay, you have to present yourself in a certain way. You have to cross your legs. You have to learn how to cook, for instance. You have to learn how to clean. But boys are not being taught that. They're not being taught how to do any of those things. So women naturally assume those roles and tend to think that those are their responsibilities, whether or not it's what they really want to do, but it's ingrained in them, and so they believe that it's their choice, right? There's even the idea of like I said before, the idea of certain, what I found is that it's I don't know how to explain it, but it's almost like it's subtle. Nobody's telling you don't study engineering. But what's happening is that because women are told to be emotional, women tend to be drawn towards more softer kind of work, caretaking. We take the subtle things like HR, all of those kind of roles are, more, you find more women in those roles simply because it's okay, it speaks to your emotional side of you, basically. And what you find is that some of those roles tend to be less lucrative than, the engineering roles, the finance roles, the work that, the more technical roles. And this is why inequalities seep in within the workplace. And like Jessica mentioned as well, there's not a lot of, even in terms of child raising as well, what you find is that there's a lot of, households where it's women are the sole or primary caregivers to their children, but men are not being brought up to think the same. And I've had situations where, and, even for people in the younger generation, the Gen Zs, you would still find people who still think that, I'm not really responsible for childcare. That's the woman's job, right? Oh yeah, I would, care for a bit, but I would step out and go back to work. that's what some men think that, childcare is. But I think that there needs to be a cultural shift. And one of the ways in which HR people can encourage this is by developing policies that kind of speak to the grassroots and changing the narratives around the way people think. So the way it was embedded in us in a subtle way, we kind of need to embed policies in a very subtle way as well. So for instance, little things like, I'm a very big advocate for equal parental leave. And the reason why is because I really strongly feel that it has the potential to strongly drive or change the way people think about childcare. So if both men and women are asked to take the 3 months off, then women are not dropping out of the workforce because they don't have enough care or support to be able to enable them to take care of their kids. If men and women see this as a dual responsibility, then that way, women are not taking a step back in their careers. Like it's a dual effort. And when you have like more support, I don't have kids yet, but I've seen people raise kids, and trust me, raising kids on your own it's not easy at all. So imagine like doing all of those things yourself. Like, so I know women are like, I would say like they're super women, because a lot of women tend to do that on their own, and they're also having to juggle their careers as well. But I don't think women need to do that. I don't think the narrative should be, super women carrying on many hats, you're, doing childcare. No, it should be a case where it's like a dual thing, where it's like the men are also supporting, women are, playing their part as well. And for me, those are some of the subtle ways in which we can encourage like some of these changes, cultural changes, essentially.
Yeah, I really like that take on maternity and paternity leave or parental leave. And it's interesting, 2 of our clients here, the one of them has like a creche in the office, so that people, it's mostly women to be honest, can like have their kids like around them if they want to, but they can still work if they want. And then another client has done kind of like au pair lift services. So like they do areas and they go fetch kids and then like take them and help them do their homework. And it's so that women don't have to feel, because it is inevitably women who have to, like in most cases, not in all cases, who have to carry that burden. So it's been interesting that it's those SME clients who are kind of doing that. So Lady, the slogan for International Women's Day this year is Embrace Equity. And kind of what they said is equality is the goal and equity is how we get there. And when I think of equity, I don't know if you ladies saw, there was once that cartoon, and it was like a wall, and there was some tall people and some short people, and they all got given the same size box, which is equality, right? So the tall person was like head and shoulders above the wall, and the short person still couldn't see. But even though they were given all the same box, people didn't have the same opportunities. And they said what equity is the tall person gets the shortest box, the shortest person gets the tallest box, and then they can all see over the fence in a similar way. So they were given different things based on kind of where they're at. And that's always something that strikes me. It always sticks with me in the back of my mind when I think about kind of equity. And I guess my question to you ladies is, what are your respective companies doing to kind of help female talent, giving them the necessary opportunities to develop and grow and succeed? What are you guys doing at the moment with that? Maybe we can start with you, Miss Sun. We can start where we left off.
Okay. I think for us, the way we're trying to level the playing field is doing a lot of grassroots work. So for instance, in STEM, what we've noticed is that obviously I think for us, like we've done pretty good when it comes to diversity as a whole. It's really embedded in what we do. So obviously what we're trying to do is that we're creating like a financial app that includes everybody, regardless of your age, regardless of who you are, regardless of, what it is. And everybody knows that women are a strong driving force for the economy, right? And a lot of these women own businesses. We have a part of our application that caters to small business owners, and majority of them are women. And for us to be able to achieve those strategic goals, it's impossible for us to have like an all-male marketing team, for instance, or an all-male leadership team. It's really impossible for us to drive that message and drive, what it is that we're trying to do in terms of financial inclusion. And so for this reason, from the get-go, from when we started, like it's always been top of mind. And it's one of the key things that, our board takes seriously, leadership takes seriously, and it's ingrained in our culture such that even the subtle things like Bumi had mentioned, like the little things like, you spoke about the overalls. For instance, little things like even making sure that tampons are in the office, or you have like pads or whatever in the office, or even the way that the roles are described. So not using things like chairman, say chairperson, like gender neutral terms, just so that women feel included in those kind of roles, and they don't think that, oh, this is not for me, right? This is for a man. So just little subtle things are some of the ways that we're driving or trying to change the narrative. And for us, one of the key things we found in STEM is that for the core engineering role, I think that's one of the areas that we struggle. Across the entire organization, we have like 57%, our organization is 57% made up of women. But when it comes down to the core engineering, there are not a lot of women in those roles. And the problem is primarily based on what I had mentioned before, which is the ideologies around like, women are not interested, or the way they are raised, they're not interested in those kind of courses. But what we've started doing is that we started like letting women, we've started by introducing a program called like a Women in Tech internship program, which is something that we intend to kick off by April. So what we want to do is to partner with schools that are educating women on STEM courses, so things around like coding, data analysis, and things like that. So we partner with these people. So what's happening in the tech space is that a lot of people want to hire senior engineers. Nobody wants to hire the junior engineers, and it's not necessarily their fault. It's because a lot of these companies are barely have like over 200 employees or 100 employees, so they don't have the time to actually nurture and grow these people from the ground up, right? So what we're trying to do is that we feel that it's something that we have to be very intentional about, whether or not we have the time for it. We just need to be able to equip our leadership team to be able to make time to grow people. So this leadership program is in partnership with companies like AltSchool. I'm not sure if you've heard of them. So AltSchool are trying to do things differently in terms of education. So in engineering, what we've noticed is that you don't necessarily need to have a degree. Like all you need to do is just to be trained on how to code, essentially. And these people are not interested in going through the normal 4 years of school. It's not, I don't even think it benefits them in any way. So these schools like just focus squarely on the roles. They give you the tools to actually train on how to become effective software developers, and then they place these people within organizations who are willing to take them. So we're saying that we're ready to take on these people and we're ready to groom them. And for us, it's also a positive because that way we're creating a pipeline of women who would eventually rise through the ranks within the organization. So that's one of the ways in which we're trying to embrace equity.
Love those, and that's great that you've got over half your workforce as women, which is really cool. I love that. For me, Jessica, anything you kind of want to add around what your companies are doing?
Yeah, so we have a program which we started last year. My company is not doing so great when it comes to the male-female ratio. I think we're about 12% women in Africa, specifically, because it's a global company. It's in Africa specifically. So what we did was I was privileged actually to kind of lead a project where we launched a female network program. So it's called the Agreco Africa Female Community. Now, embedded in that program is all of these nice things. We have the professional development wing of things, we have the wellness wing of things, and we have the events wing of things. So the events is where we have town halls with our leadership, where we put issues on the table, the gender issues that we have, what we think the company can do better to help uplift the women, attract female talent. So what we did, and it speaks to a comment I'm seeing on the chat, was have men as the sponsors of this program. And they were very proud of themselves, to be honest. I had male leaders, our MD for Africa and head of operations for Africa they were the sponsors for this program. So they helped kind of drive the approval and all of the budgets, all of the good stuff, financial implications of the program. So we have in the professional development part, we have mentors and mentees program, and geared specifically to operations and engineering, because that's where we had little female presence. The support functions, your finance, your procurement, your HR, we had quite a lot of female there, but then in the operations and engineering space, we have little or no female presence. So we have a mentor, a mentee and mentor program that is geared towards that. So in that program, we have a graduate training program where we are targeting women in STEM in schools about to graduate. So we're partnering with technical schools across Africa in our key countries and getting this targeting female engineering graduates to come on board to learn, to have a mentorship program for like a year with the possibility of being staffed if you're successful in the program. So that's one. Then we have women, developing women in leadership. So we have key, we have key high potential women in the HR space, in the general management space, that we are intentionally having development programs for executive coaching to rise up the rank really quickly, to just to help, just to have female representation in the leadership space. Because what happens is you have a diverse group of people in leadership with a diverse experience who are able to be kind of like stakeholders and for the female, I don't want to say female agenda, but for the equity agenda is what I would want to say, for the equity agenda, yeah. So we have that program, and then we have the wellness program, which is around mental well-being. We have book clubs, we have health and fitness, and then the events. So that's one big, I think that's one big thing that my company is doing to help bridge the gap. It's very slow. I would still say it's happening very slow, but it's pushing the mantle forward. It's pushing it. Yeah.
How about you, Bumi?
And I think slow but steady is great, Jessica, as long as there's consistency in some of these. I think we also need to recognize that some of these changes will take time, and I always say effort for as long as you keep it consistent, right? That's where you start to see the progress. So some of the things are similar in at the Maersk level. So we are also sort of still on the journey of getting to sort of a great number when it comes to our female. When it comes to gender at Maersk, we're thinking somewhere around 33%, right? And that's kind of not where we want to be. And we see that those numbers are even lower when we go to leadership in Maersk, right? So some of the things that we've put in place, about earlier, sort of Jessica, policy. In 2017, we actually sort of launched a maternity policy. And have sort of year on year tried to, including a process for return to work, make sure that we are not, again, we're closing the hole of losing women because they have to go off and do these traditional roles, right? And to be honest, it's taking us 6 years, but at least now we see we're actually above industry levels when it comes to return to work, where we're having 95% of our females actually coming back to work after maternity, right? But it's taken us 6 years to get here, right? And of course, now we've sort of transitioned into it being parental leave, because then you factor in not only sort of the traditional methods of having kids, but adoption, what happens there if you want to adopt kids. So we have sort of broadened up that policy perspective. And then we have targeted development programs, because again, as we're saying, we see women come in, there's probably a ceiling that they don't go beyond, and then we lose them, right? And one of the things we've also done is introduce a development, particularly for females at a certain level, to really help them to, develop their brand, but also sort of become better at understanding how they position themselves in their across Maersk, right? And we've some really great results on that. There was this whole discussion around, equal pay. And that's something that we took on from our awards perspective over the last 2 years, to really look at the gender parity and really sort of saying, are we paying fairly, right? Because again, to sustain a career in a particular role, and of course we have to financially, be fair in what we're offering both our female and male colleagues, right? And that's sort of work that is ongoing to really establish that we pay fairly across whatever gender roles that we have.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Thanks, Bumi. Elizabeth from the audience has said, do any of you have any programs or career days in STEM for high schools, tapping into these young girls early in the system? I don't know if any of you have that, or
yeah, so I'll just speak about the program that I mentioned earlier. So some of these, like I mentioned, it's not a traditional program where it's like you have to be at a certain level to get in. It's pretty much based on interest. As long as women, there's a lot of grassroots outreach programs. There's a lot of coding schools, Tech for Dev. There's there's a lot of them that actually try to get women in tech very early, as early as even high school, in their high school years. So those tech programs are actually teaching girls even very early on, from primary school level as well, teaching them the foundations of coding and getting them equipped and understanding what the career paths might look like even before then. So these programs are actually doing a lot of work, a lot of heavy lifting in terms of getting women to understand and be equipped on STEM courses very early on. I think some of the ways in which we could also drive this is through our traditional education systems, by introducing courses that are not just social studies and the things that we're used to. Also training women, men on very technical courses very, very early on. So that's one of the reasons why I'm such a huge advocate for schools like polytechnic schools, because they really give you the hands-on knowledge on what you're supposed to expect before you join the workforce. I think if possible, if it was possible for everybody, after secondary school or even after university, to go through a 1 year on ground type of training where you get hands-on experience on technical courses, I feel like it will be super amazing. I'll say obviously our educational system there's still a long way to go when it comes to that, but there are organizations that are doing the hard work of getting the girls educated. We just need to be able to sponsor them. So they're everywhere. We just need to tap in and sponsor. I think that's one of the most important things we can do as organizations.
Yeah. Great. And then kind of one of my last questions before we hand over to the audience is, what advice do you have for both kind of young women wanting to kind of enter the career force, but also for men who are wanting to make a space for women at the table? And maybe we can start with the advice for men. What advice do you have for men around how they can be better and create a space, or be an ally, as someone, as we said in the audience? What advice do you have for men to be allies? And then what advice do you have for young women?
I would say listen. For men, listen to your female colleague. Have town halls. We're doing that right here in Agreco. Have town halls. Have an open mind. Understand that your experience is extremely different than your female colleague. So listening, really listening, not in a defensive mode, but just really listen and actually practice what you've learned. It's not easy to do, but when we do that and we are able to have those difficult, not very uncomfortable conversation around how the workspace and could be equitable for everyone, both male and female, we enjoy the fruit of that. There are so many research on companies that have done that, and their profit levels there's so many research and evidences on companies that have embraced a diverse workforce, a diverse leadership team, and they are making way more, because harnessing both the female and the male skills, they're making bank, they're making money, because at the end of the day, a business is a business. They're trying to make profits, right? That's at the end of the day. So there's an advantage to listening. There's an advantage, yes. And for young ladies, I don't want to give a list of things, but the only thing I would say is the only stumbling block to you is your mind, based on my experience. And it's your mind. You have to, if you find the reasons why things will not be possible, or barriers, or why things will be difficult, you wouldn't do it. So you need to have that positive mindset. You need to have that mindset is, I can do this. This is what I want. You need to have, first of all, figure out what you want to do and keep at it. All of the tools are available to you. You just have to keep at it and have a very open and positive mindset. That's the only advice I would give.
Thanks, Jessica.
Okay.
Bumi?
Yes, great one, Jessica. I think for me as well, I think the biases that we have, right, are not specific to men. And I think that's where we need to really start, right? That the more you learn, the more you sort of are aware of these biases, right? Our slogan that we're using at Maersk is I include this year, because we really say that we need to build awareness, but also the capability of leaders, whether female or male, to understand what do I need to do and what is stopping me from being able to be this inclusive leader, right? But we also then have, as you were saying, allies, right? That we are really helping them to really articulate what can you do different as an ally, right? What are the things that you are sitting in your circle of influence that you can actually do? And some of it is around sponsorship, right? That you can sponsor a female, right? You can be a mentor. You can teach people actually how to do a job better, right? And you can identify who's the most suited in a team, but you can also give opportunity, right? To people to test. And so we're trying to do some of those practical things, but I think allyship, at least for me, it has helped in my career. The 3 jobs that I sort of had in Move, it was a male colleague or leader who said, I think you can do this, right? Let's try this. And I think that's really helpful for women in their career as they go up. Traditionally, we don't raise our hands at the first sight, right? We check, am I perfect for all these things? And then we raise our hands, which is different from how men do things, right? They raise their hands and then they figure out if they can. And we really need to change ourselves around just do it. So my advice is be bold, but also be involved. So you understand where is it that you can play, right? And then just go do it. Is kind of it. And at Maersk, we're actually hiring. So it's like, we want every brain in the game. So we're just trying to make sure that when we go out to hire for jobs, that it's non-gender specific language. We're making sure that it's open and everyone sees that they can actually apply for jobs. Yeah.
Brilliant. Love that. Misan?
I think my advice to how men can be better allies is first and foremost like understanding their privilege. It's a very hard thing to do. I don't think anybody, if you're confronted by anyone and you're told that you do have a privilege or you do have a leg up, not everyone is willing to listen or willing to. The first step is to be defensive and say, hey, like, how am I privileged? I worked hard to get where I am, right? But it's understanding not privilege as a man generally in a Nigerian society, and be willing to listen to women's experiences. So when you're being told about initiatives that are driving more women into the workplace, instead of being defensive and say, hey, what about men? But it's taking time to actually understand why these programs are in place. We spent a lot of time actually speaking about like our personal experiences and things that we've gone through. I don't know any woman in general that would say that they've not had like similar experiences while working in Nigeria or in Africa as a whole. So it's understanding that these things actually do exist, acknowledging their privilege, and making a conscious effort to actually be an ally. So like Bumi mentioned, things around sponsorship. So whenever, there are opportunities for you to get women into the room, do that. Whenever there's opportunities for you to encourage or celebrate women, you need to be doing that, right? That's what I would say about men. I think it's first and foremost recognizing that privilege, because that's something that a lot of people don't seem to understand. It's like we're encouraging and putting all these policies, but they don't understand it. They don't understand why women need 3 months off. They don't get it, right? So it's like understanding first and foremost, why are we doing these things? The reason is because of some of these cultural things that kind of limit women and creates like gender inequality in the workplace, right? And I think the only advice I'd give to women is, I know women are powerful. We're, we have what it takes. I think the only thing is just once we obviously like get our foot in the door, it's just doing the best that we can with the opportunity that we have. I don't think we necessarily need to work harder than men. I don't think anyone needs to work harder than anyone. I think those kind of things create like unnecessary pressures. Like when it comes to women, they always tell women like you need to work like 10 times harder so people could see you. No, I think the problem is that organizations need to create workplaces that encourage everyone to fail and encourage everyone to learn and encourage everyone to grow as well. If you find yourself in an organization that is not, regardless of how much you've spoken and, shared your thoughts or whatever, then maybe it's not the right organization for you. There will be organizations that would embrace what you have and your thoughts and all of that. So it's just, once you have the skill sets, be ready to do the work. But once you get in there, just be confident and just do it, basically.
I think, Ms. San, on your point on privilege, I always say to people, acknowledging your privilege doesn't mean that we're saying you didn't have hard things in your life. It's an acknowledgement that you may have had hard things, but in a systematically, you didn't face the same things that someone would have at like a systematic level. It's not taking away your own personal hardships, but systematically, you might not have had those same hardships. Because, like you said, sometimes people get defensive and think that it's around, no, but I fought for things in my life, and like, absolutely, but there has to be an acknowledgement that at a system level, it was easier because you're a man, you're a white, whatever it may be, there has to be that acknowledgement of that privilege. Ladies, we have 3 minutes, so if one of you can answer Elizabeth's question, it says, in your experience, what things have been seen as practices from fellow well-intentioned women that have hurt the D&I cause in the workplace? Do you ladies, any of you have kind of one quick thing to share there for Elizabeth?
Yeah, so I would say it's also the culture. I don't want to be like an ageist, but in Africa, my experience, the older women tend to think in line with, the men, because of their own life experience. So you have a colleague who's a woman who's a bit of an old, a bit older, and has been in an accountant in the company for 15 years. No growth, no intention to grow. She's happy and comfortable in that space. So when you start bringing all these thought-provoking initiatives and policies, they really resist it, and they say, oh, but he's the man. And they say it openly, and they feel very comfortable and confident that they are correct. So I would just say that very quickly. So that's one example. And they push
They
back
tell you
because
to
then
stay in your
it's
lane.
exactly. And the men are like, you see, she's your fellow woman, and she's saying it's Africa, it's tradition. You don't have to do more than a man. Yeah, it's internalized.
Thing around what Bumi was saying around like bias, because sometimes we can internalize our bias because it's all we hear, and you think it must be the way, and then you've got to kind of battle with your own internalized bias. But ladies, I learned so much from each of you. I had such a wonderful morning. Just thank you for your openness, for sharing. I found it really interesting, and I took something away from each of you. So really and truly thank you. And then thank you to the audience for your participation in the chat, the questions that you asked. Hopefully next Women's Day talk, we can talk about the progress that we've made in the year. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, ladies. Happy
It was great meeting all of you.
Great meeting you as well, Miss Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
Bianca.
Bye.
Bye.